Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tran Mendez, and I am an academic trainer with the Center for Teaching and Learning. Today, we have Dr. Marie Bakari from the School of Business, and she is going to be going over how to write an abstract. And so basically, you are going to learn lots of great tips on how to take the best part of your research and to write a summary and to attract lots of readers. And just a couple of housekeeping items here for you today. This webinar is being recorded, so don't feel like you have to write everything down feverishly. You can go back to it later on, and we will be posting the presentation as well so that you have Dr. Bakari's slides. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the chat or the Q&A function to type in your question, and then at the appropriate time, I will let Dr. Bakari know that there are questions for her. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Bakari.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marie Bakari, and I'm with the School of Business. And today I'm going to cover some tips and tricks about writing your abstract. Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's start with defining what the abstract is. As you can see here on the slide, we've got a word cloud that brings in a lot of the parts of research that you may have done, whether it be qualitative or quantitative. So let's look at some common misconceptions about the abstract. Once you complete your dissertation, you'll find that you've amassed a lot of information about your topic. And it would be real easy to try to jam all of this into an abstract. While you were writing, you learned a lot of things that you may want to share. And it is tempting to try to squish this all into a single page. You'll have to tame yourself, though, and just include minimal information. Here on the slide are some of the key features. You want to identify what your study is about. You also want to give your reader an overview of what they can expect to learn about your topic when they read your document. You'll want to include keywords and phrases, and this is so that your work will show up at the top of the list when those key terms are plugged into a search engine. You want to capture the essence of your study. You're not trying to give all the details. If you give all the details, no one has a reason to read the rest of the document. So it's kind of like a sales pitch. And if you take the minimalist approach, you'll be able to inform your reader and entice your reader to dig deeper into your research. Now we're going to talk about creating your abstract. And no, that's not a typo. I did the add word intentionally and crossed it out because, simply put, an abstract is like a commercial for your work. With abstracts, if you look at the first term here, media selection, well, your media selection is automatically chosen for you. You're putting this on paper, and it will show up on the internet when people do searches for you on your particular topic. So during the dissertation process, you may have been advised to hire an editor. When you write your abstract, however, your chair, your SME, and AR will all look at it. And these will be the professionals that will review your ad copy, so to speak. Figure out ahead of time what key points you really want to make in your abstract. What do you want readers to know about your study? You want to create an outline or a script for your abstract. And since this is not a once and done exercise, you can edit and re-edit as necessary. Simplicity is always best. You do not need to use big words to impress anyone. So let's look at the requirements. What you'll note is that the dissertation manuscript rubric, you'll find all the requirements you need in that rubric. Let's take a look at them individually. You stated and restated your problem several times throughout your dissertation, but this piece of information tells the reader exactly what your study is about. The purpose statement contains a lot of information also about why it was necessary to do this study in the first place. Of course, you want to explain how you went about completing your study, so you'll craft a sentence or two about the methodology and design that you used. And the findings will be a sentence or two about what was learned through the research. And finally, you'll complete the abstract with 1 or 2 recommendations. I'd like to add a few cautions here, though. By the time you get to writing your abstract, you're probably very tired of working on your dissertation. But with the end in sight, this is not the time to let your guard down. Think back to when you started writing your problem statement. You had to consider your degree, whether PhD or applied. You had to consider your specialization. You'll have to keep the same things in mind when you're writing the abstract, because the prospective audience will be looking for these things too. When I defined what an abstract was in the previous slide, I talked about keywords. We all use Google to find things and pieces of information, so you want to make sure that your abstract contains the keywords that others will be looking for. Tran, did we have any questions so far?
We don't have any yet. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A or the chat box, and I'll be able to let Dr. Bakari know that there are things to be addressed.
Okay, well, let's continue. All right, so let's talk about the abstract length this time. There is a designated page in the NCU template for your abstract. The required elements must be condensed into less than 350 words. Remember not to alter the preset formatting in your NCU template. For example, the word abstract, I review a lot of documents, and oftentimes people will take the word abstract and turn it to bold. It should not be in bold print. Just stick to the template. Notice in the example here on the screen that the first line of the abstract is not even indented. So this is something that is specific to abstracts. There is no indentation on that first line. And then the entire abstract is presented as a single paragraph. So there are no paragraph breaks. There shouldn't be any line breaks either. And it will stay in double spacing per the NCU template. Now, let's take a look at the second bullet on this slide. For publications, if you review the publication guidelines for authors on any journal, you may find that they have differing requirements for your abstract. So you may be able to use as only up to 150 words. Something to consider as you move beyond your dissertation. So when you're working on redeveloping your work for the journal publication, you will have to follow those authors' guidelines for that specific journal. And like I said, in most cases, the minimum or the maximum amount of words is actually at 150. Here at NCU, we focus on helping students keep their abstracts to a single page, because we know you want to put everything in there. So let's move on to some tips about abstracts. Begin with a wow statement. So what do I mean by a wow statement? If you think back to the earlier slide when I was mentioning creating a commercial for your dissertation, one of the very first things you'll see in any advertisement is something to capture your information, your attention. It may be music, a popular song. It may start off with a big bang. It may start off with quiet music. Some commercials actually capture your attention with a stunning silence. But either way, you want to create a wow statement so that you can capture your reader's attention with that first sentence. I'll give you an example. When I wrote the abstract for my dissertation, the first sentence was, entrepreneurs are vital to the economic stability of any community. And right away, you can tell that my research was about entrepreneurs and economics, some of those key words. You'll have to include the problem and the purpose of your research, but I caution that you shouldn't copy and paste your problem and purpose statements directly from your manuscript. is they contain a lot of information that, you know, everybody knows the requirements of a problem and purpose statement, but that's not what they're reading the abstract for. So you can capture the essence of your work by being crafty with language. For example, here's another statement I used. This applied business research was an exploration of the coping strategies of African American micro-entrepreneurs to the barriers that impede business initialization, growth, and success. So that kind of tells you the whole story of my dissertation, where I was looking at how did people overcome barriers that were in their way when they were starting businesses? How did they get over those barriers so that they could extend the life of their businesses for the long term? So from the statement, you can tell my study was qualitative. You could tell who the participants were, and you could also tell why the study was done. For the findings in my study, I said, findings revealed ways to change the business support dynamic for this group. I only used 12 words, but the findings were indicated, but not spelled out. So if you wanted to know what the outcomes were, you'd have to read the entire last chapter of my dissertation. All the statements I quoted from my abstract follow APA form and style. For those writers who struggle with passive voice, I've actually got some good news for you. In an abstract, you can use passive voice. So that's the good news. Well, that's all I have on abstracts today. Abstracts are short, and unfortunately so was this presentation, but I would love to entertain any questions that you might have.
I don't see any yet, but let's give them some time to type them in.
Okay.
I know I have a question. Students, well, dissertation candidates spend so much time writing, and there's so much information. How do you cut it back to only 150 words? That's what I feel like that would be so difficult.
You've got to be crafty about it. In some cases, you can actually combine some of your statements. The second statement I read out was actually a combination of not only the problem, but the purpose statement. I included the key pieces of information like qualitative and narratives. And what those types of words, those are research words, and they indicate to the reader exactly how I went about doing the study, but without reading them the entire chapter 3 to tell me exactly how I went about it. So you kind of have to try to combine things a little bit. But again, remember, you're really creating an ad, so you want to have a little spark to it to capture people's attention.
I love that. So using powerful words to just get them.
Yes. Just grab your audience and tell them, read my research.
Do we have any other questions? Any scenarios? Anybody out there that is actually at this point or close to it? So from Jane Russ, we have, are quoting references ever used in an abstract?
Oh, they are not. You don't need to. In fact, APA does not allow citations or quotes in abstracts. This is just, again, plain speak about, okay, what is the research about? What's in it? Maybe give a clues to 1 or 2 findings. But one thing I would add about quoting, even in the dissertation itself, remember that you're practicing to be a researcher when you write a dissertation, and you're also preparing to become the subject matter expert on the topic. So quoting others can actually weaken your work a little bit. So I always recommend to my students to avoid the quotes. But yes, no citations in an abstract. And you can actually stay away from identifying specific statistical tests or specific outcomes, in terms of numbers, because the numbers aren't really going to be very meaningful in an abstract. If whoever the reader is, if they're interested in your methodology, they'll dig into your study and take a closer look at that. But those are details that you can actually leave out.
Thank you for that. What are some things that you have seen in your role as a committee member, some things to avoid?
Okay, things to avoid. I mentioned a few as I was giving the presentation. You don't want to alter the format. I've seen a couple of folks, they reduce the line spacing to get it to fit all on one page. But remember, it's not just about how long it is, it's how many words total. And I have seen a few people include citations, which are not needed, and the cutting and pasting of the problem and purpose statements. I see that a lot as well. So I tell the students, okay, you need to go back and rearrange this and try to condense it a bit. I have received abstracts that are 1.5 pages and had to work with the student to get that down to a reasonable size. So what else? That's about those are some of the different things that I do see with abstracts when I review them as a committee member.
We have one more. I was planning to review the summary section of each chapter and distilling each into a single statement or two. Does that seem reasonable?
That's a lot of work. If you follow the rubric guide for the manuscript, there is the first block on the manuscript rubric is actually the abstract. And they're really only asking you for 4 things: the problem, the purpose, some of the findings, and then 1 or 2 recommendations. So if you follow that, I'm sure you can pull it apart. And consider your abstract somewhat of an elevator speech. I don't know if you had practice doing this in some of your coursework, but you only have 30 seconds to make that impression, and the abstract is literally read in about 30 seconds. So you want to stick to those types of tactics when you're approaching the abstract.
Let's see here. Marian, do you have a question? If you could type it into the chat, that would be great. Let's give Marianne a few more seconds to see if she can type in. Oh, here it is. Let's see here. It was I'm not sure what that is, Marianne. The pit, was the problem the purpose? What was the last thing that she said? Oh, what was the last thing that you said?
Okay, problem, the purpose, some of your findings, and 1 or 2 recommendations.
And Marianne, I will be posting the presentation along with the slides along with the recording in the next couple of days here for you too. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the chat. If you think of anything else after today's webinar, you can send them over to the CTL at ctl@ncu.edu, and I will make sure that Dr. Bakari gets them. And then other than that, like I said, this was being recorded, and I will get this ready to post in the comments within the next couple of days along with the presentation slides. And thank you so much for your time here today, Dr. Bakari.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
All right. I hope everybody has a great day. Bye-bye.